Our state has some incredible problems. My name is Lynn Hinderrocker. I'm here to talk about that with you and talk about the trends that have shaped this state and dragged us in one direction or another. We're not really we're not realizing the dream we had way back in the early 2000s or even around 2008 or 9 or 10. My name is Lynn Hinderrocker. Welcome to WOWBIZ Nebraska. We're going to get it on right now. Welcome once again to WOWBIZ Nebraska. I'm Lynn Hinderrocker. I have two great guests today, so do not leave. This is where business strategy, trends in the state of Nebraska, job creation, workforce attraction, and all the things that kind of come together to build our economy taking place right here. We're analyzing. And my first guest today, by the way, is in the solar energy industry. It's a hot topic. All right. Jenni Charleston, I want to make sure I say that correctly, with Great Plains Renewables here in Omaha. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. You know, you're involved in one of the most interesting segments of the state's economy, and I want to talk to you because everybody is a little bit confused about solar energy, as you probably know. So tell us a little bit. Let's say, for instance, your organization, do you sell solar panels then to residents as well as businesses? Do you do both?
Yes, we do both.
Okay. And strategically, which of those two segments of our society are the best? Commercial deals are typically bigger deals, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I would say both, because it benefits anyone that lives in a home, which is, I think, 90% of us.
Sure.
And also the business owner, which commercial can be anything from a farmer to a big corporation that wants to.
Okay, so you serve everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this. How does somebody calculate the viability of investing in solar panels? In other words, it seems like such an awesome idea, environmentally correct, obviously. Why isn't the entire city, why doesn't everybody have solar panels? I mean, that probably sounds stupid, but help me understand why it hasn't taken off in mass.
Sure. Like you said initially, it is an investment. It is an investment to your money to save money, but it is an investment to get started.
Yeah, but you have to put some significant cash up front.
Sure.
So that you can save money long term.
Sure.
Essentially, that's the idea.
For sure. And
yes.
we work with people. We've recently had people contact us and say, I know we can't afford an entire solar system to help save on the reasons they're contacting us.
Yeah.
But do you guys install a partial system? And we sure do. If someone wants to start with 3 panels, it's not going to save a ton on electricity bills if that's what they're looking for, but we'll help. We sit down and try to figure out the best possible way to help them out.
Does the buyer of a solar system for a home, are they doing it out of environmental conscientiousness, or are they doing it because in their opinion it's just kind of a bottom line economic decision?
We have both customers.
Yeah, yeah, you see them both.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Do people ever act like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money and we couldn't possibly afford to do? I mean, do you run into price resistance mostly, or why wouldn't, once again, I realize there is an upfront investment. We're going to talk about that, but I just can't understand why more people aren't investing in renewable energy in general. And maybe you can elaborate on that more.
Sure. I mean, there definitely is an upfront cost, but there's an overall gain. Sometimes what I have to explain to customers is it's like any other big purchase. You have to look at the longevity versus the short term. Yes, I'm paying X amount right now, but unfortunately, the utility company has to charge a price, and that price for them continues to go up with supply and demand and gain, like everything else that we pay for. So, there is a cost up front. But the long term, you're paying less for electricity with going solar.
Sure.
Because, in terms of the economical aspect for the investment. And so that is hard. I mean, when you look at the chunk, even if you go with a partial system, understanding that I'm investing into my family's future, I'm investing into my business's future to help save longevity.
And then we have the issue about the sun. All right. Eventually, in the evening, it gets dark and there isn't radiant energy. So most systems then switch back to the grid. So those of us in the Omaha or Nebraska area, you are actually utilizing, you continue to utilize some electricity from the main provider.
Right, correct.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And here in Nebraska, a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that this state is particularly actually better than average insofar as is the radiant energy that's kind of bouncing around in our environment.
For sure.
Do you know anything about that particularly?
I do, and the concern we get a lot is, well, we're not in a state that provides sun
Florida or
year-round.
Arizona,
Yeah,
right.
Arizona, where it's sunny year-round.
Sure.
But the thing there is sometimes the panels overheat and they're not actually producing the solar power that you need from the sun because it's 120 degrees for 4 months out of the year.
Is that right?
It is. And so the neat thing that most consumers don't think of is when there's snow on the solar panels, there's a reflection that reflects off of it and brings not necessarily additional rays, but you're still getting sun rays, not 100% like you do in the summer, but you're still
more than
benefiting
you'd expect.
than you would think of.
I've actually heard that Nebraska is the 13th best state in the United States
Sure.
for solar energy.
Sure.
Is that right? Yeah. And the lifetime value of solar panels and so on is like what, 20, 25 years?
Right now it's 25 to 30 depending on the brand that it's by.
Sure. And they don't require a lot of maintenance or repair, do they, or do they not?
They really don't. We've had just a couple maybe that have had to be replaced, but nothing.
Not a lot.
Yeah, it's very, we rarely do have to replace
sure.
it because of environmental.
So the average, let's play around with some numbers, and we'll realize we're generalizing.
Right,
okay,
yeah.
But let's take an average home, say, of 2,000 square foot, all right, a family home. All right?
Sure.
And they really are interested in panels. What would an average investment to cover a home and offset as much as possible, what would they spend? $25,000, $30,000, something like that?
Generally, it's around that. It really depends on your electrical consumption.
Sure.
And the size of the system. If you go ground mount, which is going to produce, 90+% of your electricity needs, or if you go with a roof mount.
Or a roof mount. And which is preferable in your opinion then? I mean, how does it work?
In terms of producing more solar, definitely a ground mount if you have the space for it.
Yeah, okay. I would imagine the roof mounts are a little more challenging from an installation point of view.
For sure, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say, for instance, 25 grand.
Sure.
All right. Now, I've heard that there are tax advantages.
Yes.
Tell me real quickly about that, okay?
Sure. Right now, the benefit doing solar this year is after December 31st, we lose a 30% federal tax credit. That's going away, 30%.
It is going away?
Yeah.
Okay, that's too bad, okay.
Yeah.
And the cost of the panels, is it going up because of the Chinese tariffs and so on and so forth, or not?
There is that, and that's
Possibly.
why, as that continues, that's something we're going to have to be considerate of, for our customers and their necessities with panels.
It's a challenge to get a handle on all these variable costs.
Sure.
Now, here's the big issue. I'm going to put this is the elephant in the room.
Let's do it.
In Nebraska is an unusual state. All right. We have NPPD. We have OPPD.
Sure.
We talk a lot about democracy and so on and so forth, but the fact of the matter is in Nebraska, we really have a socialist or even a communistic energy state, right?
We do.
These costs are artificially low. Isn't that true? Yeah. So therefore, the incentive to invest in alternative energy is not so great as it would be in many other states. Is that correct?
Well, it's not. Nebraska has it set up right now to not be beneficial. There's no state tax credit. A lot of other states there are, and we're actually ranked 44 in the nation, so we're kind of on the naughty list for going solar to benefit Nebraskans right now, which is unfortunate.
Yes, exactly. But also, when I get my monthly bill from OPPD, it's a little bit lower than that electricity would cost in many other states. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not actually.
Okay, no, that's a major strategic consideration, I've been told, and because obviously they're looking for high rates so that they can invest in renewable, and then we would compete, So anyway, that's also another consideration. So, are there a lot of solar operations in the state of Nebraska, to the best of your knowledge? I'm not sure. Are there a ton of them, or just a few?
There's just a few, which is beneficial to be able to produce a quality company and product to make sure that we don't just have cowboys running around installing solar, that we have, educated, invested people that are very aware of
what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've heard on a national statistic that training solar installers is like the #1 job in America.
For sure.
Is that the case do you know, here in the state of Nebraska? Is that also the case?
It needs to be more. There needs to be more official solar panel installation training modules. We could, as a state, do better at training on how to, but it's definitely something of the future. So it's very,
it seems like
very innovative.
And community colleges are kind of the people that we're looking to help train.
Most definitely.
Solar installers. Did you know, I just read this in USA Today recently, by the way, I'm jumping around, but that when you ask somebody, what is the number one thing you are looking for in a new home, guess what the answer is?
I'm sure it's renewable energy or
solar panels.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Solar panels. It blew me away that it was that high on the list.
For sure.
And so I would say, if you're in the industry, either as an installer or an administrator or a salesperson or whatever, this should be a burgeoning industry for you.
It really should.
Yeah.
It really should.
So the principal of the firm is Dale Luke, who's been around the industry for some time.
For sure.
He's kind of an engineer, mechanical type of guy, right?
He is, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the plan for a small company like yourself? And there are others around. I know in Lincoln there's an operation as well. Are you just kind of hanging on in there and just doing a little bit here and there? Are you getting SBA money or investors? I mean, what's a good way to launch and run a company in this industry? Any insights about that?
Sure, definitely the education background, the knowledge, the forefront of someone you can run with that has got the whereabouts of how to install a panel, because that's really what the company's all about, is installation and sales for us. And so being able to just forefront run with someone that has got all that knowledge.
Got to have education.
Right.
One of the things that I did find out recently that I found so interesting is that the panels convert DC, direct current, into AC.
Yep.
Right now, a lot of people just don't fully comprehend that, but I mean, they're just not familiar, with that kind of thing. And panels are only about 18% efficient in terms of converting radiant energy into DC. I assume that's increasing over time.
It continues to increase, with what you're paying per kilowatt hour, and then the DC rate. It continues to just dramatically be more beneficial for the consumer, for the resident to buy, to be able to benefit and reap those blessings.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, I'm very excited. Maybe we'll have to check back with you in a couple of years and see how things have evolved with you and Dale. I'm sure by then you'll have more people. And I think renewable energy is a coming thing here in Nebraska. I think we're a little slow, but we need to catch up. And by that time, I think the technology will also accelerate even further, right?
For sure, most definitely.
Yeah. The key thing is the cost coming from China, right?
Right.
Are there any companies here in America that make cost-efficient panels, or does it all have to come overseas?
Right now, we will work with companies inside the States, but our quality panel right now is actually coming from Italy.
From Italy?
Yeah, from Italy.
They used to manufacture shoes. Now they manufacture solar panels.
Exactly.
Jen Charleston, thank you so much for coming.
Yes.
I really enjoyed the chat. Thanks for bringing us up to speed on a very important trend here for residents and businesses alike. It's a real joy to have you.
For sure.
And please give my best regards to Dale Luke.
You
Okay?
bet. I sure will.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the promotional sponsors of this unique and powerful show. The first one is Curzon Promotional Graphics. Now, you've heard me talk about them from the very beginning. Curzon. They've been around for a very long time in the Omaha area. They do and by the way, we're living in an economy, an interactive economy, an online economy that is being increasingly driven by graphics. I'm sure you already know that. And Curzon is a great place to go for ideation and creativity, as well as then, of course, production. And they provide a great price. So stay in touch with Curzon Promotional Graphics. They'll increasingly be part of your marketing, especially your exhibits, but even the massive signage or the very small things, Curzon Promotional Graphics. Now, I want to talk to you about a very special operation here in the Omaha area, Alpha Tech One. I'm going to spell Alpha and then TECHONE.com. These people will come to your home, your office. They'll pick up your computer. Easy, convenient, take it back, diagnose it, fix it for you, very cost competitive, deliver it back to you. Now, I've never heard of anything like that before. I don't know if you can go anywhere in the metro area and find anybody that is that convenient. AlphaTech1.com. Tell them that WOWBIZ Nebraska referred you Very high quality work and incredibly convenient. So I thank them both for sponsoring WOWBIZ Nebraska. We'll be right back with a very special guest. I can't wait to dig into it. We'll see you soon. Hang in there.
KPAO Community Television, handmade in Omaha since 2013.
Welcome back to WOWBIZ Nebraska. I'm Lynn Hinderrocker. This is an exciting program, and we're going to tackle one of the core issues here in the state of Nebraska. It's bigger than this particular show can contain. That's why I brought one of my good friends with me. Bruce Arant is an illustrator. He's a published author. He's a marketing guy and a very literate individual. Bruce, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks
You
for
bet.
having me.
It's my pleasure to have you, and we'd like to see Bruce around here as much as possible. So we're going to dive right into the topic here, and I invite you to, even if you have to interject, that's quite all right.
Okay.
Let's see if we can't clarify and define what's going on here. Now, I'm going to provide some background.
Okay.
Right? About a week ago or so, the Omaha World-Herald published a lengthy essay about the importance of Western Nebraskans and Eastern Nebraskans, quote unquote, coming together or reconciling their differences, being more cooperative, and so on. All right. By the way, about 2-3 months ago, the unicameral in Lincoln, Nebraska, they were stuck in a very controversial debate about TIF, which is a kind of a financing resource, building buildings and developing areas. And they were arguing between people in Ogallala and Broken Bow and North Platte out in western Nebraska and eastern Nebraska, particularly the African American portion, where we kind of have a concentration of blacks here in the Omaha area. And they were arguing as to who deserved these TIF funds more. And it got a little nasty, and the whole unicameral just kind of shut down. They were unable to have an official ending to the unicameral session. It's a very sad thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just avoided it.
right. So we have this polarization here in Nebraska because the two sections of the state look at the world differently. And I dare say this kind of applies to the entire country.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get this on the table. Some people know it, some people don't necessarily know it, but it's a very interesting dichotomy and polarization, and it can really bring the state to a halt.
Because people are passionate about both sides.
Yeah, and it relates to their identity, right? There's this notion of otherness.
Right.
It's so hard for people to say we've all been brought up and conditioned in a certain way, and we're like this, and then there's people over there, we don't know so much about them, but they're not us, they're them. Yeah. And it so becomes very, very difficult to reconcile issues and cooperate with those people. But America is changing, and I think Nebraska is changing.
It's a reflection of America.
Yeah, it really is, and that's the beauty of it, and that's why I felt so strong about having this conversation. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I actually watched an interesting talk show. This is about a year ago, and the interviewer was speaking to a very literate author. She'd written a beautiful book about leadership and so on, and she's talking about leadership in turbulent times. All right, it was Bill Maher, by the way, who, as we know, is a liberal talk show host, and he's listening to her, and she's chatting about how America's changing, and he interjects. And he says, it's really not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's not really about blacks versus whites. He said, it's really, I think, about rural versus urban.
Oh, that's interesting.
He said that right there in the middle of the show. And I stopped the show and I ran over to a piece of paper and I wrote this down because I think he nailed it there.
And is he speaking from a national
Yeah, he was talking about national.
Nationally.
Yeah,
Rural.
nationally. He said, I think the whole country is bifurcated or polarized, and it's really fundamentally about how rural people see the world and themselves, right? And how urban people see themselves and the world as well. And they're not really converging.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I think he's really right. I think it applies to Nebraska as well. And of course, as you know, Bruce, we've talked about this before, I think that there is a word that describes the situation, not in a negative way, but in a positive way.
Yeah.
And this is a tough thing get your hands around initially, but I'm going to share this word. We're going to come back to it later on. We're going to do another show about this. But this is a word I've played around with for over 15, 16 years, and I think America is becoming urban natural. Mm-hmm. That's that word. Yep. And I know you know the opposite words, right? The urban tonality is dynamism and fast and movement and steel and metal and concrete, I guess, if you think about materials. And then the word natural is kind of like rural, organic, pastoral, wholesome. Right. Exactly the opposite. And it's so interesting to try to take two opposites. We're shifting now to a linguistic thing instead of a social commentary. Right. You're one of the few people who can understand that and stick with me. Right. But putting those two words together and saying, this is America. Yeah. Those two opposites coming together. I know it's very uncomfortable, but if you see yourself, this is about self-image and identity, I guess. And awareness. Realizing there's all this and there's all that, and that we're actually better. This is starting to sound like a political speech. We're actually better by having these two opposite
dichotomy.
The demographics and the psychograph, and having them together into one unified concept, albeit diverse, than we are existing over here and over there and separate and saying, well, they're not good. We don't like those people. We're over here. Right. Because then we're unable to leverage. I mean, the diversity can become a positive instead of a negative. Now, let me ask you this question. Does that general pitch, that general idea, is that going to resonate with people? Will people go, oh yeah, no, that's a really important point? Or they're going to say, I don't really know. All I know is we're this way and I don't want to be associated with them.
It's going to come down to the individual as to how they process and digest that concept of
diversity and balance.
Working together, trying to be, on the same page with people. Some people just don't want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, some people just, they want to be on this side or that side. There are others that are trying to embrace both sides, and they recognize the differences, and they see the value in trying to work together, live together, that sort of thing.
Yeah. If somebody says, well, try to get me to buy into the idea, and I guess I would say this, and I hate to get too philosophical, some people don't like that kind of thing.
Right.
But really, there's always a higher truth. Mm-hmm. When we see a standoff, there's always some way to look at the situation that kind of is a broader view. Mm-hmm.
Like they say, there's his side, her side, and the truth.
Yes.
I've heard that before, and that's kind of the same thing.
It is. The interesting, I heard a metaphor once, you don't see, for instance, branches on a tree. Now stick with me, I know this sounds a little, you don't see branches on a tree arguing and fighting with each other. Because ultimately, if you go down a couple, 2-3 feet, you see they're all part of the same thing. Right. Now, I don't know, to me that makes great sense. That may seem a little bit corny, but I guess I'm saying this. If you saw somebody from western Nebraska right here, and that person feels it's his job or her job to get resources and build the city up and attract business, whatever, and then you have somebody from eastern Nebraska, same deal, Omaha or Lincoln, doesn't matter really, and you have the two of them, and they really represent the urban and natural prototypes. Right. How would you bring those two people together and get them to kind of, drop their defensive attitude or whatever and be cooperative on making strategic decisions for the entire state? What would you do about it?
You'd have to somehow, and that's a hard question, but you have to somehow define common goals. What are your objectives? What do you want to accomplish? And what do you want to accomplish? And see if there's some way that they can come together in some unified front. And they're going to have different perspectives, because I love western Nebraska. I love that whole area down. I've lived in eastern Nebraska all of my life, so I understand both sides. I've spent a lot of time out in western Nebraska, and I'm not sure what that unification is. I'm not sure what that would come down to, but you have to somehow come to
find some commonality.
Commonality.
That's
the whole thing. Yeah.
The other thing that I agree with you totally, and getting to that, by the way, is probably pretty tough.
That's the big question.
I read as I was talking, this takes us into conflict resolution. We're going to talk about that again in the next show. But there was a gentleman back during Jimmy Carter's era who negotiated a treaty between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and you know, all the controversy there. Yeah. And it was fascinating to analyze the process that he brought to the party to bring those two deeply opposed parties together. And Jimmy Carter kind of brokered that interaction. And I thought to myself, gee, maybe we inject that into this overall dialogue, because there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. And I think maybe also children. I keep thinking to myself, maybe generationally we can't do it. But if we say, you know what, let's just take a look here at people, children from these various areas, different races, backgrounds, whatever, and watch how they play and collaborate, and they don't care.
They don't care
about any of those other considerations. No. You know, and maybe there's a lesson we can learn there.
There's always been a lesson from children. Yeah. The whole world should.
And you should know that, by the way. Let's talk briefly, 30 seconds about your career. You are done a lot of things, but you are a children's author and illustrator for some beautiful published books. Tell us very briefly a little bit about that as we wrap up this segment of our show.
10 years ago, I jumped from being an editor. I'd been an editor in book and magazine publishing, and I always had a dream.
Yes.
I always had an itch I needed to scratch to be a children's book illustrator, and I took the plunge when the economy was at its lowest point.
Very brave. Oh, very courageous.
Or there's probably other words for that, but I'm just very thankful that.
Yes.
And I mostly illustrate for other people. I've got 2 books, that I've.
And the titles of the books are?
Simpsons. It's very deep, heavy philosophical.
Okay.
Stuff. Simpsons sheep won't go to sleep.
Yes.
And then the sequel, Simpsons sheep just want to sleep.
And I've read them both, and they are charming, extremely professional, high end. It's real a pleasure to watch them. And of course, I have grandchildren that live around me, so I love the books. Now, listen, I want to talk to you. I'm going to ask you right now. Will you please come back for this next show?
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to dig into this. We're going to dig into this polarization. We're going to talk more about urban naturalism, because there's really an issue, a social, cultural, political, economic polarization. It's going to tear our state apart and our country, by the way.
We have to work
but
through.
we have to work our way through it. Maybe urban naturalism is the key. I'm not sure, but we're going to get into that later on.
Okay.
All right, we'll talk about that very soon. My name is Lynn Hinderwacker. This is WOWBIZ Nebraska. This is the wonderful show. I hope you watch it again and again and come back and check it out on YouTube. We are looking forward to seeing you again. We'll be right back with my favorite guest, Mr. Bruce Arant. Thanks again for watching. Talk to you soon.